Hi, this is Dennis with Cyberkraft. I'm here to talk to you about the new Network Plus 009 version. Just came out. Let's go through all the different changes that are with this new version. So I have here the exam objectives from the 008 and the 009 version. If you take a look at the exam weight, you can see that it's pretty similar. But that's kind of misleading because there's some major changes that have been happening to this certification behind the scenes that are really influencing what's on the exam. So if we take a look at this at face value, we see the exam domains really stayed the same. The only changes you have in domain 1, network fundamentals, is now network concepts or networking concepts, and everything else is the same name. The weights are about the same here too, 24 to 23%, 19 to 20. We have some mix-ups here in the bottom 3 domains, but really pretty similar to what we saw before. The test is still the same. You're still going to have a question, multiple choice and performance-based question test with a maximum 90 questions, a mix of PBQs and multiple choice. You can have between 2 and 10 performance-based questions. Usually get about 5 performance-based questions on your test, and then about 80 multiple choice questions. Multiple choice single answer where you just select one answer for each of the multiple choice. Now, looking into the exam objectives, they have updated the technologies here. Of course, you learn about the OSI model, but some of the newer technologies you're learning about include more quality, more fiber optic cable emphasis, learning updated cabling technologies. We're taking away some of the older cabling that we may have used before. We're also focusing on different ports and protocols. Some of the older ports and protocols have been taken off of the recommended study list here. So if you're looking for ports and protocols, go to cyberkrafttraining.com. We have ports and protocols list for Network Plus for most of the certifications. So if you just focus on the protocols and the ports that you need for the test, not the ones you don't, because there's a lot out there. Some you don't even need anymore. For example, some of these aren't even on this port and protocol list that we have in the exam objectives. And that's one thing CompTIA does a nice job with. They do a really good job of listing what you need to study for the exam in the exam objectives itself. So some of these concepts have been shifted to different domains, and sometimes CompTIA will do that between domains. One of the main changes they've done is they've changed the exam prep materials here. So the exam prep materials used to be on the CompTIA CertMaster, and recently CompTIA has acquired the company TestOut. If you're familiar with TestOut, they were competing, or basically a way to provide instruction, and they did a lot of CompTIA materials on their site. They had CompTIA oriented labs and lessons. So CompTIA purchased TestOut, and when they purchased TestOut, they purchased the ability to host their own cloud instances. If you didn't know this, CompTIA had to pay another company to host their cloud instances in the CompTIA CertMaster. So now CompTIA is able to host their own cloud environments, their own labs, and what they've done is they've basically used the TestOut environment and taken and repurposed the TestOut course material to create the new Network Plus 009 material. So let's take a look at that new TestOut platform. This is how it looks here. If you go to this TestOut, you're going to see your course outline. You have all of your lessons here on the left side. Each one of these sections can be expanded. And as you go through, you have the lessons integrated with your labs on the side here. So as we see, we have small office, home office networks. We get a few lessons explaining data link layer, network layer functions, diagrams. Very similar to what you see before in CompTIA Learn. Now you're seeing in these TestOut lessons here, which is called CompTIA Perform. So CertMaster Perform is the new name here, that it integrates Learn and Labs together. Okay, so that's CertMaster Perform, and it's all integrated. So if we go down, we see we have, here's a lab, create a small office, home office network, and we can just start the lab right there. One nice thing is the loading times are pretty quick anymore, so the lab's already running, which is great. And we can see that we have, let me make this a little smaller. You can see the bottom part. If we take a look at this lab here, you can see at the bottom we have the ability to add different devices. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to add some PCs and a laptop. We have the ability to add a switch here. So we're creating a network diagram here, and then we have a router. Then we have the ability to link these nodes. So in this one, what we'd want to do is, of course, we want to connect this switch to each of these devices. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. And then we have like a star topology here. We also have a network map on the right side where we see our connections. And we can activate these devices or turn them off as needed. When we right click there, we have the ability to launch the device. We can launch that Windows device, and we can fully configure this device here. It's a virtual instance, so we can navigate through this device if we want. And essentially it's a way to simulate, and this is not an actual device, so it's not actually running like it was for this particular lab exercise. It's a simulation of what it would be as if you were looking through this. So if we try to navigate through, the entire Windows drive here, we're not going to be able to do that. It's a simulation of what would be here. Okay, so you see there's not a full Windows deployment here. These are simulated folders. The idea here is to provide enough simulation to train you on the task at hand, not provide the whole lab environment or the whole device for which might be unnecessary in some of these labs. We also have a simulated browser here. We have a Chrome browser. But as you see, sometimes these features aren't simulated. But the nice thing is, because it's not going to be the whole instance, it really helps teach you the concepts you need. And you can load this very quickly. Then you answer some questions here. Okay, we can answer some questions on the IP address. I'm not going to go through the whole lab. I'm just going to go ahead and score this, score that. We didn't answer those correctly, and we were supposed to ping the gateway and connect PC1 to an internet router. So we didn't quite do that the way the lab wanted us to, so it gives us that score. But then we're done and we keep moving. So that's the lab. We finished it up. If you're used to the CompTIA CertMaster, sometimes those would take a little longer to load and to conduct. So it's kind of nice to have this lab available very quickly, teach you the skill, and then move on. It really does help with the flow of the lessons, I find. And then here, of course, you have practice questions. You get questions for each of these sections. So this is just a little quiz for section 1. So the practice questions are also integrated into the Perform environment. So you have the questions, you have the labs, and the lessons. Really, you just need to go through all of those in order, and you get a good understanding of the Network Plus materials. It's very helpful. So that's the CertMaster Perform. You also have practice exams here, practice exams at the bottom. These practice exams are going to be very similar to the real exams. So you also have some additional practice, like you'd say performance-based questions. You have exam details. It teaches you a little bit about the exam, tells you about the exam weight. So there's some more information here about what you can expect on the exam, which is really nice. So I think it's a good upgrade to the CompTIA materials that we've seen with CertMaster Learn and Labs. It's more of an evolution of that, very more streamlined and really focused on teaching you the information you need very quickly. Now, let's go back to the exam objective. We mentioned you had some mix-up with the exam objectives. For example, if we look at network implementation, before we were talking about things like HVAC, some industrial control systems, VoIP. We're focusing a little more in the 009 on cloud implementation, virtualization, different protocols, different technologies that are used to create the network environment. Though these were on these dynamic routing protocols were also on the 008 version. And it's just kind of shuffled around. A lot of it's very similar, but again, what we have now is a little more updated, a little more concurrent. As you see, network implementation it's just been a little reshuffled, okay? We're seeing different frequency options here. We're not focusing so much on the 802.11 standards, learning those standards. You had to memorize all those standards for the 008. We're focusing more on the underlying frequencies, which of course you could link to these standards, but CompTIA has decided it's not necessarily important for networking professionals to memorize the standards themselves, just understand the technology behind it. And I think I agree with that because it's really just memorization, learning those standards. It doesn't really help you in your day-to-day job. Going into the main three, I like how they've done this. They've kind of explained how you can link or how you can create diagrams for different network layers, which is nice. So how to organize your network, and that's a really big part of ensuring that your devices are working correctly, is keeping track of them. And a lot of these concepts that we're seeing back here in the older version have been pared down and streamlined, so we're not necessarily learning those redundant concepts or concepts that might not be directly related to networking, which is, I think, very good. We're focusing a little more on IPv6 networks too, since IPv6 networks and devices are more common now. They're becoming more acceptable, and you do see some IPv6 only networks. It's IPv4 is being adjusted. Of course, there's a lot of IPv4 networks, but we're seeing more and more IPv6 implementation, which is very helpful. So more focus on that. The 008 version was really focused on IPv4, so we're focusing a little more on that. So network security, we see a little more focus on logical security here. Some of these concepts, and this is where your Security Plus experience will be really helpful, or if you're learning Network Plus first, this is going to help you when it comes to Security Plus. You'll learn a little bit about this before you get into Security Plus. We're learning types of network attacks, which I think is very valuable, though we did see that in the old version too. We're still focusing on things like dumpster diving and shoulder surfing, which I don't think are as relevant anymore. I think with the social engineering focus, it should be more on how hackers are, phishing, SMS phishing or smishing, I think are much more prevalent. Instant messaging, phishing, ways, I'd say the social techniques that attackers are using to trick people into giving out passwords, trick organizations into revealing information, because those are the types of attacks we're seeing in the real world. So I'd like to see more focus on that instead of the traditional dumpster diving and shoulder surfing, tailgating. We see those all the time. Those are very basic. I'd like to see more creative concepts there. It's more just memorizing those terms. Now, we have more concepts in Network 4. It's been pared down a little bit. We're reorganized. And then troubleshooting, we still have the same methodology for troubleshooting, which CompTIA is going to keep pretty standard, which it's a good methodology for troubleshooting. We see troubleshooting cable status. It's a little different here. The types of tools that you would need to memorize, you don't necessarily need to memorize those tools as much. And then we have different technologies, different utilities, I'd say, within the computer, within the command line, rather than on the 008, where it's focusing more on tools, like physical tools that you would have to walk around, spectrum analyzers, cable testers, things like that, that you would physically use to test your network. So the 009 version is focused more on troubleshooting from a logical sense, from a utility sense, not from a tool, a physical walking around, do cabling sense. There's still some focus on that. So yeah, overall, those are the changes to the Network Plus. Overall, I think it's a good change. I think they did a really nice job. Network Plus, I think, is always going to stay fairly the same. They're not going to have many major shakeups in the Network Plus exam. It's one of their flagship certifications. It's a very good certification. Really like Network Plus. It really does teach you the foundations of networking, and it does a good job of being vendor neutral. So you're not just learning like a Cisco system. You're learning networking for any type of device, and we're seeing, especially as Cisco loses market share, Network Plus becomes more and more relevant. If you pigeonhole yourself into a Cisco certification, then you're only qualified to work with Cisco systems. Network Plus qualifies you to work with any type of network. So I hope this is helpful to learn the big changes here we have to the Network Plus exam, and I appreciate you watching in. Thank you so much. Have a great day.